This is the rundown, where headlines hit harder, stories go deeper, and the truth doesn't hide behind the noise. I'm Brian Taylor, and in the next few minutes we're cutting through the clutter to bring you what matters most: fast, clear, and unfiltered news. From power moves in politics to the breakthroughs shaping our world, this isn't just the news. This is the rundown. Before we dive in, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a moment. Also, drop a comment and let us know what you think. We would love to hear your thoughts. It really helps out the channel so we can continue to bring you the news that matters. And if you're curious about the gear, books, and tools we trust, check out our top picks at the Linktree in the description below. Now let's dive into the video. Good evening, I'm Brian Taylor, and this is The Rundown. Tonight we begin with escalating tensions in Los Angeles, where the city has become the epicenter of a nationwide backlash against federal immigration enforcement. Over the past week, the streets of LA have seen chaos, confrontation, and controversy following aggressive ICE operations, and a sweeping federal response that's drawing fire from both state leaders and civil rights advocates. In a stunning move, President Donald Trump ordered 700 active-duty Marines into Los Angeles to support ongoing immigration operations. These troops arrived Tuesday morning and joined more than 2,000 National Guard personnel already stationed in LA, Paramount, and Compton. The Marines, based out of 29 Palms, completed rapid training and, according to defense officials, are ready for deployment to protest sites by the end of the week. Acting Pentagon Budget Chief Bryn McDonnell told lawmakers the cost of the National Guard deployment is expected to exceed $134 million. These forces are being integrated to, quote, protect federal property and personnel, with specific training in crowd control, de-escalation, and the lawful use of force. But this heavy military presence hasn't gone unnoticed or unchallenged. California Governor Gavin Newsom is now suing the Trump administration, accusing the president of unlawfully federalizing the Guard without state consultation. On social media, Newsom called the move illegal and immoral, and hinted at further legal action over the deployment of U.S. Marines in a civilian setting. President Trump, when pressed, didn't rule out invoking the 19th Century Insurrection Act, a law that allows the president to use military force to quell domestic unrest. His response was, "If an insurrection were to occur, I would absolutely consider invoking it. We'll see." Meanwhile, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass declared a strict downtown curfew from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. after protests turned destructive. Demonstrators blocked major roadways, torched self-driving cars, and targeted federal buildings with graffiti and vandalism. Flashbangs echoed into the night as officers in riot gear pushed back crowds and cleared the streets. The LAPD reported hundreds of arrests, including protesters charged with looting, assault, and defiance of curfew orders. By Wednesday night, more than 850 people had been taken into custody across multiple agencies, including the California Highway Patrol and the LA County Sheriff's Department. LA Police Chief Jim McDonnell clarified that his department was not working with ICE and remains bound by California's sanctuary laws. However, he admitted officers were overwhelmed by the scale and intensity of the protests, many of which were triggered by reports of federal agents conducting immigration raids in areas such as the Fashion District and Home Depot parking areas. Protesters converged on federal buildings, including the downtown detention center, where clashes escalated. Electric scooters and concrete chunks were hurled at officers. At one point, 4 autonomous Waymo vehicles were set ablaze, sending black smoke into the sky and causing several explosions. Federal authorities confirmed over 100 immigrants have been detained since the start of the enforcement campaign. But the crackdown has sparked backlash far beyond Los Angeles. Over 150 individuals were taken into custody during comparable demonstrations in San Francisco. On the streets, the message from demonstrators has been clear: They see this as an assault on immigrant communities, a militarization of American cities, and a dangerous precedent. What began as isolated ICE raids has now spiraled into a full-scale political showdown between state and federal powers, drawing the eyes of the nation, as far as what officials are saying. In the heart of Los Angeles, where growing outrage over federal immigration raids has triggered a high-stakes political and legal showdown. What began as a wave of peaceful protests has now drawn military involvement, ignited fiery debate between state and federal leaders, and placed the city at the center of a national crisis over immigration, states' rights, and presidential power. In the latest development, California Governor Gavin Newsom has launched a second legal battle against the Trump administration, this time over the deployment of active-duty United States Marines on Los Angeles streets. Posting Monday night on X, formerly Twitter, the governor accused the administration of turning military service members into political pawns. He blasted what he described as an unlawful use of American forces for what he called, quote, a parade talking point. Newsom went further in a Sunday letter to the president, calling the earlier deployment of National Guard members a serious breach of state sovereignty. The move marks what legal scholars believe is the first time in decades a state's National Guard was federalized and deployed without that state's request, a significant escalation that has stirred both political and constitutional concerns. Newsom wasn't alone in his criticism. He was joined by Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, who laid blame for the increasing unrest squarely on the president's doorstep. At a Tuesday press conference, Bass stated clearly, "This has nothing to do with public safety. It's driven by a different agenda." Even as she urged demonstrators to remain peaceful, tensions on the ground continued to rise. Fires, looting, and violent clashes broke out across parts of downtown Los Angeles, spurred by a sense of fear and anger over the federal crackdown. Demonstrators set fire to self-driving cars, confronted police, and obstructed major highways like the 101, where fireworks and debris were hurled at patrol vehicles. At times outnumbered, law enforcement countered with tear gas, flashbangs, and other crowd control measures. LAPD Chief Jim McDonnell recognized the disorder but rejected the White House's assertions that the city was in disarray. He stressed that local officers acted swiftly but had not been informed in advance about the immigration raids that triggered the protests. "We were not pre-positioned because we weren't informed," McDonnell explained. Meanwhile, President Trump, defiant on his social platform Truth Social, dismissed the criticism, doubling down on his support for the troop deployments. "Looking really bad in LA. Bring in the troops," he wrote. And bring them in he did. But that response has only fueled more backlash. Former Vice President Kamala Harris called the move a dangerous escalation meant to provoke chaos, while longtime California Congresswoman Maxine Waters accused the administration of weaponizing deportation to stoke fear and score political points with far-right voters. "I think he's setting the stage for martial law," she warned. Governor Newsom didn't hold back either, denouncing the immigration raids as weakness masquerading as strength. In a fiery interview on MSNBC, he called President Trump a stone-cold liar and accused him of bypassing state leadership and inflaming an already combustible situation. Despite these criticisms, the administration has shown no signs of backing down. White House spokesperson Abigail Jackson pushed back, stating, "It's an outright lie for Newsom to suggest there were no issues in Los Angeles prior to President Trump's involvement. To date, over 850 people have been arrested throughout Los Angeles since the protests started, and the total is still climbing." This moment is being described by many observers as a constitutional flashpoint. With the Insurrection Act looming in the background and Marines trained for de-escalation now potentially facing American citizens in the streets, critics argue that the line between national defense and political theater is being dangerously blurred. And while these protests haven't yet reached the scale of the 1992 LA riots or the 2020 unrest following George Floyd's murder, the symbolism of federal troops marching through a sanctuary city, unrequested and unwelcome, is stoking old tensions in new ways. Despite curfew, protests and tensions persist in downtown LA. Even after Mayor Karen Bass implemented an 8 p.m. curfew in downtown Los Angeles to quell ongoing immigration protests, demonstrators continued to gather in defiance. The curfew may have dimmed the nighttime energy, but helicopters still buzzed constantly overhead, and law enforcement vehicles, sirens blaring, crisscrossed the streets throughout the night. By day, crowds from across LA and beyond still flowed into the downtown area, particularly near the federal complex where both the National Guard and LAPD stood at the ready. Media crews swarmed the scene as well. Nearby communities such as Little Tokyo were hit hardest by the unrest. Businesses remained closed, their windows boarded up, with some owners choosing not to reopen until tensions subside. For longtime residents and workers, this was a surreal but eerily familiar situation. With more protests expected over the weekend and no clear end in sight, many downtowners found themselves living under constant police presence and uncertainty. Lisa H., a legal consultant who commutes from South Central, described an unsettling shift in the atmosphere. "It feels staged," she said, "like people are just trying to provoke chaos. This doesn't feel like the kind of unrest we saw in the past." Others, like Meltem Karakova, a young mother new to the area, noted the contrast between the relative calm of their immediate neighborhood and the noise and anxiety generated by the unrest just blocks away. "We stay away from the federal buildings," she said, gesturing cautiously toward the turmoil. Local business owners described a more personal toll. In Little Tokyo, Ryota Sakai, a green card holder and shopkeeper, said his sales had collapsed since the protests began. Though his storefront had been spared, neighboring shops weren't as lucky. "Windows smashed, fires lit, just because we're here," he said. Joyce Leung, who has run a clothing boutique on First Street since 2009, echoed the same concerns. Her shop had avoided trouble, until curfew night when vandals shattered her front door with a pellet or BB gun. "This isn't like past protests," she said. "It's more aggressive now, bolder." She and her staff spent the next morning cleaning up glass, covering the entrance with makeshift drapes, and weighing whether to close up completely ahead of the weekend's No Kings demonstrations, a planned protest targeting the use of military force and Trump's growing authoritarianism. Raul Gomez, a flag vendor from Torrance, said he'd been selling up to 200 flags a day near the protests. He described a mixed crowd, many peaceful, but a few clearly seeking confrontation. "You can tell who's here to make noise," he said. "The rest of us? We just want to be heard." Grace Martinez, who attended the protest with her teenage daughter Raylene, said they were there to stand in solidarity with the immigrant community. "My father came here from Mexico. I wouldn't be here without him," she said. Despite the danger and property damage, she remained hopeful that the demonstrations would stay peaceful. Raylene carried a sign that asked, "Who would Jesus deport?" and expressed a more hardened outlook. "Not everything will be peaceful," she said. "Violence isn't the answer, but it gets attention." Another protester, who identified himself only as Jay, carried a combined US-Mexico flag and said he had been participating every day. He distrusted media portrayals of the events. "They focus on the worst moments," he said. "Most of us are peaceful. It's the strong police presence that escalates the situation." As more demonstrators prepare for another wave of protest, the tension between residents, police, and the federal government continues to mount. With no resolution in sight, downtown Los Angeles remains on edge, and the eyes of the nation remain fixed on its streets. The protests against immigration raids in Los Angeles have escalated significantly, prompting a strong federal and state response. President Trump ordered around 700 active-duty Marines to join the 2,100 California National Guard troops already deployed across Los Angeles, Paramount, and Compton. These military forces are tasked with protecting federal personnel and property amid the unrest. The deployment has sparked legal challenges from California Governor Gavin Newsom, who called the move illegal and immoral, and sued the Trump administration for federalizing the Guard without his consent. The Marines, based in 29 Palms about 140 miles east of LA, quickly completed their training and were expected to be on the streets within days. Both the Marines and Guard members have been trained in crowd control and de-escalation tactics, though many locals view their presence as an escalation. Mayor Karen Bass imposed curfews in downtown Los Angeles to curb vandalism and looting. urging residents to avoid the area unless absolutely necessary. Despite these measures, tensions boiled over during weekend protests when thousands took to the streets, blocking freeways and clashing with police. Fires were set, including on self-driving cars, and police used tear gas, rubber bullets, and flashbangs to disperse crowds. LA Police Chief Jim McDonnell described the situation as overwhelming, pointing out that many protesters were agitators intent on causing trouble. Nearly 850 arrests were made over the course of the demonstrations, with charges ranging from failure to disperse to looting and assaulting officers. Governor Newsom and Mayor Bass have blamed the federal government's deployment of troops for inflaming tensions, warning that the aggressive response is provoking chaos rather than calming it. Newsom described the federal actions as a serious violation of state sovereignty and called on residents to resist giving in to fear or intimidation. National political figures like Congresswoman Maxine Waters and former Vice President Kamala Harris have also condemned the troop deployments, describing them as dangerous escalations designed to spread fear and division rather than ensure public safety. As protests continue to ripple beyond Los Angeles to cities like San Francisco, the conflict between federal immigration enforcement and local sanctuary policies has reached a critical point. The deployment of military forces without state approval marks a historic and contentious moment, raising questions about the balance of power between federal and state governments amid one of the largest immigration enforcement actions in recent years. Los Angeles County Sheriff Robert G. Luna revealed Friday that nearly a dozen deputies have been injured amid the ongoing unrest linked to immigration raids. The violent clashes began on June 6 as ICE carried out operations in Los Angeles and neighboring counties. Luna reported that 10 deputies suffered injuries after protesters threw rocks, Molotov cocktails, and even, high-grade pyrotechnics at law enforcement. "We've encountered some unusual and dangerous weapons out there," Luna said. "There's a clear distinction between peaceful demonstrators and those who come armed to attack our officers." During a news conference, Luna addressed plans for nationwide protests scheduled for Saturday against the Trump administration. He stressed that while the cause behind the protests is important, violence against officers or destruction of property will not be tolerated. "Our deputies are facing a hazardous situation every day," Luna added. Meanwhile, Los Angeles Police Chief Jim McDonnell assured the public that the LAPD is fully prepared for the expected large crowds during upcoming demonstrations. He emphasized the department's goal to protect public safety while respecting individuals' rights to protest peacefully. "If anyone comes here intending to commit crimes, damage property, or harm others, including officers, they will be arrested," McDonnell said firmly. Since the protests began, hundreds have been arrested in connection with acts ranging from vandalism to violence. McDonnell credited the city's curfew, which remains active throughout the weekend, with helping to curb much of the criminal activity, especially in the evenings. California Highway Patrol officers are also patrolling statewide to monitor and respond to potential trouble spots. In a major legal setback for the Trump administration, a federal judge has ruled that President Donald Trump acted outside his authority when he took control of California's National Guard during the recent immigration-related unrest in Los Angeles. U.S. District Judge Charles Breyer handed down the decision on Thursday, siding with Governor Gavin Newsom in a sharply worded opinion that directed Trump to return command of the Guard to the state immediately. According to Breyer, the president's actions violated both federal law and the 10th Amendment, which protects states' rights. "Federalism is not a matter of convenience," Breyer wrote in the opinion. "Even the president cannot bypass the Constitution to enforce his will." The ruling follows Trump's controversial order to federalize 4,000 National Guard troops in California in response to riots sparked by immigration and customs enforcement operations earlier this month. The protests, which began peacefully, quickly escalated into violent clashes, prompting the White House to assert emergency powers. However, Breyer dismissed the administration's reasoning, labeling it as lacking legal merit. As part of his order, Judge Breyer issued a temporary restraining order preventing further federal deployment of the state's Guard units and directed that operational control be returned to Governor Newsom. The decision will remain in place until at least noon on June 13, pending further review. Plaintiffs were also instructed to post a nominal bond of $100, a procedural requirement for injunctive relief. However, just hours later, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals granted a temporary administrative stay of the district court's order. The appellate court has scheduled a series of filings and a virtual hearing, with briefs due by June 16th and oral arguments slated for June 17th. California Attorney General Rob Bonta praised the initial ruling as a critical defense of state sovereignty. "The federal government cannot override the authority of our state leadership without lawful cause," Bonta said. The Trump administration's move was not only unconstitutional but escalated an already tense situation. Bonta added that the deployment of military forces was unnecessary. "There is no rebellion, there is no invasion, nothing is preventing the federal government from carrying out the law through lawful means," he stated. He also noted growing bipartisan concern from military veterans, pointing to a recent statement by former high-ranking military leaders, including ex-secretaries of the Army and Navy, as well as retired four-star generals, who expressed support for California's legal challenge and warned against domestic deployments that jeopardize national preparedness and civilian trust. "This isn't about protecting citizens, it's about trying to silence dissent through intimidation," Bonta said. "This pattern of behavior, ignoring the Constitution, testing the limits of power and undermining democratic norms, cannot go unchecked." Despite the court's ruling, the White House stood firm in its stance. In a statement, spokesperson Anna Kelly criticized the ruling as an overreach, arguing that Trump was within his legal rights to act. "This decision endangers our federal personnel and undermines the president's lawful duty to ensure the safety of federal property and agents," Kelly stated. "We will challenge this ruling in court and are confident that we will prevail. We will continue to cover the story and bring you updates as they become available." Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.